You've used the term money sequence a few times. For the listeners that aren't familiar, would you define money sequence versus the life sequence?
Yeah, well, this all became it has more generic application, but because you could have a money sequence, I suppose, that was instrumental to the life sequence. But let me just go through the life sequence of value first. It's very, very simple and straightforward, and it's just basically you have a life host or you have a life structure, and that or life means, but whatever form of life it is, it goes through means of life. It must have means of life. We must breathe every second, and we must have water and so forth. It must have means of life to become more life, that is, to continue as life and to, at best, biodiversify and become more intelligent at the human level. And so the life sequence is just life through means of life to more life through means of life, at the best, not only to reproduction, but more flourishing life, more, and then I really get into what all that means, but we don't need to do that right now, but basically it's thought, action, and felt side of being, and it becomes more flourishing life. So we have life through means of life to more life, and that circuit reproduces itself forever. I mean, that's really, from the primitive protoplasm to now.
Right.
Now what we have is a money sequence that happens. Well, it's happened really through civilized societies to some extent, that we've had this money sequence, and it's private. That is, it's only for private owners, and they turn money through life as means into more money for themselves to do it more money, returning to themselves to more money, to more money, to more money, and that becomes the money sequence of value. So you could have the exchange medium as we have in the ordinary, the market, the traditional market, where people, they're direct producers, sell their organic food and handicrafts, and it's the labor of those who own and sell it, and it's it's basically labor intensive, and it's local individuals with their personal knowledge and so on. And you have money that acts as an exchange medium between their product and someone's purchase of it for their own lives. At that point, money is not a problem. Money is actually very useful for people to convert what they can do into what others can do for them through an exchange medium. But what happens with the money sequence of value, it ceases to be an exchange medium for exchange of means of life for people to produce for one another and to have the means of life they require and have the means of exchange available to them. It changes into sheer money multiplication. It has no life function. It doesn't even, and the real cancer stage started happening when it no longer needed anything of concrete life value or anything of value at all as a middle term. It just turns, this is the derivative moment, it turns money into more money for private money possessors without doing anything, without providing any function. And of course that's gotten into the level of just, trillions and trillions of dollars a day are being manufactured in this way, where they have no committed function. They produce nothing whatsoever. So that's the money sequence that takes off as autonomous and exponentially multiplying, serves no function whatsoever, but is only evaluated on how much money it returns to its private possessors. And that's the only objective going. And that's called growth. And that's called profit returns. And that is affirmed even as it eats away the body of the society.
Well, let me extend that question a little bit, because you touched upon the market system. Obviously, you viewed the work that you participated in, Zeitgeist Moving Forward, and there's a series of critiques that are made to the market system as being intrinsically inefficient in kind of a very fundamental way. For instance, we have the application of cost efficiency, where a corporation needs to cut corners to produce so it can compete with other corporations that are cutting corners. And do you feel that such flaws in the ability to produce what you could consider correctly in a scientific way being inhibited by the need to preserve and cut back on cost efficiency? you feel that those components are problematic?
I think you're going to the heart of the matter with saying there's something deranged in what we're counting as a cost here.
Right.
And you're seeing one of the manifestations of the deranged notion of cost, and one of the manifestations is that you don't have long-lasting goods, for example, perfected goods, because you want to have a market that you can keep continuing to sell to, and you want to have it sold for a low cost for maximum profit, and so forth. I agree with all that, but the problem is deeper in the very notion of cost itself. Cost itself only means in this system, I'm talking about high theory economics, I'm talking about Samuelson's text of economics, virtually everything you see written on so-called economics is really diseconomics, is that cost simply means cost to investor. That means money cost to money sequencers. That's how you decode it. All they mean by cost is money cost to money sequencers. And they want to reduce money cost to money sequencers, and they want to amplify, produce as much possible of money returns or revenues over cost. But it's always only in money terms within the private money self-multiplying sequence, money sequence. And so if you understand cost in that way, then not only are you going to have the problem that you've identified, you're going to have problems at every level because you don't count any life costs in.
Right.
It's absolutely life blind. So you don't count the cost. Well, supposing we sell this junk food, for example, and it causes all these problems with obesity and so on, cancer, through all the carcinogens and so forth. Well, that just doesn't compute to the system. All it is concerned about, all it tracks, all it thinks in terms is, does the money of the investor, is the cost for the money cost for producing a money profit, is that as low as possible? End of story. So what happens to the laborer doesn't matter. What happens to the consumer doesn't matter. What happens to the ecosystem doesn't matter. What happens to culture doesn't matter. It is structurally life blind. It excludes all costs from view. The only cost it takes into account is the money cost to the private money sequencer. End of story. So this predictably leads to the sorts of crises we've had over time. Nature is wonderfully resourceful and people are wonderfully able to carry on. But eventually, cumulatively over time, if you pay absolutely no attention to any cost but how much the money costs to private money sequencers, then virtually everything that should be being counted in is going to be destroyed. It's going to be cumulatively destroyed, and it's going to be so predictably. It's predictable in principle, and of course we just have confirmation of that happening all around us in all sorts of places that we hadn't thought to look, but that's what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And another element of that life cost, which is the same fundamental inefficient train of thought on the life ground level, but yet efficient for the market system, is this sort of self-preservation of dominant institutions, where you'll have institutions that strategically limit efficiency or stifle competition, if you will, something that might be a better good or service, something that might be more sustainable even, because sustainability very often is the enemy of the consumption system that we have today.
Right.
So you have this it's paralyzed. So scientific inquiry, development of renewable energies, obviously, which we could have done a long, long time ago, it's stifled. And I think that's another extension of that. Would you agree?
Yes, indeed. But I would say, and when we go to which institutions are, preserved and multiplied and which institutions aren't, then we go beneath the institutional issue to, again, the single, same, dominant selector. The main, prime, ultimate selector is whether it adds money revenues to private money sequencers. End of story.
Exactly. No, I completely agree.
That's what's happened to the university, for example. I, come from the university, and what's happened there is basically it's all turned into money sequencing. Administration replaces the capitalists, and you can predict everything they're going to do. Does it bring more money into central administration? Then they will select for it. If it doesn't bring more money into central administration, it doesn't matter how original research it is, it doesn't matter what breakthrough is happening, it will not be selected for approval. And so you have the same system has now gone into the institution of the university. The one thing that you might say is the key to the social immune system, recognizing basic underlying patterns that aren't seen on the face of things. That's what research in university and professors should be about, and indeed in some cases are, but basically that's all being selected out. And so we have the problem right in front of our eyes at the university institution level happening, and that I don't know how many people are really aware that that's what's happening to the university. Certainly this is an unspeakable within the university. Now I've been talking this a lot, and more people are talking about it. But basically, what you'll find is that the community inside the university, they have a good thing going. Each of the individuals is highly competitive. I mean, even when I got hired, there was 200 other people applying for the job that all had their PhDs, etc. Now it's even worse in the sense of just extremely competitive, and what is selected for are the people that are going to serve basically outside money sequences and bring in funding. And those people don't want to hear what you got to say. You're the enemy if you say this thing. And the people who don't want to be in it, who are, say, in a field that hasn't been completely taken over, like philosophy, they're afraid of saying anything less they might lose their job, or the administrators are going to be, because, it all has it's a systematic renewal. Every year it's thought that tenure guarantees. But, there's a basic selection process going on all the time about whether you get a raise, whether you get a promotion, whether you get so much added to your pension possibilities. Every year this is going on, and if you offend anybody inside the cabals of the system, who are all in turn basically, with noble exceptions, are all basically bound to the money sequence system, then they're just afraid it'll be hard for their career. So you basically have individual careerists, not real thinkers and researchers, but individual careerists who think also in money terms, and they're keeping their mouths shut, or their eyes shut, one or the other. And so institutions it's not just institution as such, like my friend John Ralston Saul has thought, the institutions are the problem. No, but you've got to go back down to what the causal mechanism behind the corruption of the institution. The same thing's going on in health, public health care, and, research or hospital account systems. It's all about how much money they bring in, and that's it. And so that starts being the selector for everything at every level. And so the one places where we had made huge breakthroughs since 1945 in particular, through science, public science, basically within public universities, and public health, medical research was basically public. That's all been privatized, and it's all privatized basically parasitic on the university and parasitic on health institutions in order to make them subjugated entirely to the private money sequence. Just as an example here of the way it could be.
Sure.
Benjamin Franklin, he talked... He was a smart fellow, and very high-ranking fellow. We all know him as a founding father, and he invented the Franklin stove. Now that was a huge money earner in the sense of him having a patent or copyright on it. He knew that was a possibility. He just refused. He said everything should enter into the public domain. That's the whole point of human progress, is that intellectual discoveries pass into the community as what's being done for. That's the way the human race has evolved. And so he didn't take, though the possibility was there, he didn't want copyright or any protection on his patent. He just wanted people to have a good stove when they didn't have a good stove. And in fact, that's what drives every researcher, really, is that they want to do something for humanity and the field basically it's the field they're in. They want to make a contribution. That's what really drives them. And, of course, all that has just been privatized in our lifetimes, This has all happened quite recently. That is basically, since the late 1980s, since all this whole system started coming in. It started working on the university, where the universities could produce their knowledge product for patent. Bob Dole was part of one of the founders of that bill, which started basically turning the universities into money machines at the same time as they withdrew public funding.
Rated ARG for pirates. F*** you.